And good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hey, have you taken advantage of our November 2021 three-book special? Hey, save yourself well over $20. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. There's a banner right up at the very top. Okay, pardon me. Listen, I want you, I'm going to ask you to go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 with me. And as you turn there, I want to share an anecdote with you. Many years ago, I was sitting at my desk, and I had my Greek text open in front of me. And make no mistake, I'm not a Greek scholar. I have an interlinear here. I have tons and tons of lexicons and grammars on the shelf behind me and in there and over there and, what have you. Okay, so I was sitting there. Now, my Greek interlinear is based upon, obviously, and it's based upon the Nestle text, but it's also the King James translation. Okay, so I was reading in the King James. Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him. And by the way, the syntax and the grammar in the Greek demands that the parousia and the gathering are at the same time. They are essentially the same events. They're coterminous with one another. The parousia is not here and the gathering over there. Matthew chapter 24, 30 and 31 proves this exactly. They'll see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather together the elect. Hello, parousia gathering. And this is parousia gathering. Oh, by the way, Matthew chapter 24, it's the erchomai, but it's also the parousia of Matthew 24 and verse 3, and it's the episunagoge of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, Matthew chapter 23 verse 37, and Matthew 24 verse 31. They shall gather together, episunagoge. It's a rare Greek word in the New Testament. So here's Paul using the very word that Jesus said would take place at his coming in the judgment of Jerusalem in AD 70, which was his coming, his erchomai, and his parousia. And Paul uses parousia and episunagoge. And yet people try to delineate between them. But anyway, Paul said, I beseech you, based upon the parousia and are gathering together unto him, that you be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as if from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Well, I have to tell you, at the particular time that I was reading this text, I was really struggling with my eschatology. I had begun to struggle with all of these New Testament time statements. And now in a very little while, the one who is coming will not tarry. And I'm going, okay, in a very little while, there's not 2,000 years. For crying out loud. And the end of all things has drawn near. Christ is ready to judge the living and the dead. That was 2,000 years ago. But thought I had an out. While Paul, on the one hand, would affirm that they were living in the last days, the coming of the Lord had drawn near, the days had been shortened, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, 28 to 32. Okay, that's all true. And that was talking about the impending judgment of Jerusalem. But the same apostle said, brethren, hey, look, don't let anyone convince you that the day of the Lord is just at hand. So Paul taught an at hand, imminent coming of the Lord. Then he turned around and said, but the real day of the Lord is not at hand. See, I thought I had that figured out real well. And by the way, Mr. Kyle Pope tries to make that argument based upon the King James. Well, like I said, I had my interlinear laying there. And I looked at the literal translation. Don't let anybody convince you, as through an epistle, as through us, as that is come, inestakin, which is a perfect tense of inestimi, the day of the Lord. I was like, wait a minute. The perfect tense means has come and is present. I started grabbing commentaries like crazy. Commentator after commentator after commentator. You know, men such as F.F. Bruce, brilliant scholar. He comes to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 2, and he says, now look, it's not possible that anyone could believe that the events of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 had already happened. Therefore, we're not going to translate this text according to the Greek. We're going to make it say, don't let anyone convince you that it has, or that it's at hand. You're going, wait a minute. Because of your presuppositional theological convictions, you're going to say, I'm not going to follow the Greek? I spent day after day in the library at Oklahoma Christian College, as it was called back then, going through commentary after commentary after commentary on 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And you know what I found? Over and over again, the commentators use their presuppositional theology, their traditional theology to say, and they'd say things like, insofar as the Greek is concerned, there is no question that it should be rendered as, don't let anyone convince you that the day of the Lord has already come. No question, no debate. They would even share with the reader how the perfect tense of inestime is used over in Romans chapter 8 and in other passages as well, and in all other of those usages of inestime in the perfect tense, it refers to it as something that had come and was present. When Paul said, I'm convinced that nothing past or things to come, nothing present in estime or things to come. See, Paul's saying, I'm not convinced, or I am convinced that nothing in the past or in the present can separate us from the love of God. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no refutation. There is no argument to be made. The proper translation, New King James. And over the years, I have examined now in excess of 60 English translations and probably more than that of commentaries. The critical Greek scholars agree. Anastakin means has come and is present. The translations, with but a tiny little handful of exceptions, render it, don't let anybody convince you, the day of the Lord has already come. That brings us to Matthew 25, 14 and following. Oh, as well as Matthew 25, 31 and following. Oh, as well as Matthew 25, 1 through 13. Because you see, we are told that each one of these parables in Matthew 25 is talking about the yet future coming of the Lord at the supposed, I would call it, imaginary end of time. So, Matthew 25, all three parables supposedly refer to the end of time coming of the Lord. Do you see a train coming? That day when this passage hit me, as I looked at the Greek, as I grabbed my commentaries, as I grabbed the lexicons, as I grabbed my grammars, the question dawned on me. No, it didn't dawn on me. You know, the dawn's kind of slow. No. The question came crashing in on me. Dawn, if the day of the Lord is an earth-burning, time-ending event. Now listen, I want you to go back to last Friday's review and refutation of Kyle Pope's book, Thinking About AD 70. I discussed this in even more detail there. I'm giving you just highlights here. So that question crashed in on me. If the day of the Lord is what I have always been taught, a time-ending, earth-burning, cosmos-destroying event, when every human being who has ever lived, ever died, ever decomposed, gone back into the dust or out or into the seas and waters and whatever, how could anybody, number one, how could anybody believe that that day of the Lord had already taken place? And furthermore, if the gathering together is a literal rapturing of living human beings off of the earth, how could anybody believe that all of the righteous had already been snatched off of the earth? Oh, how could they believe Paul had already been taken, when after all they're writing a letter to him saying, Paul, it's already happened. What in the world's going on here? Why didn't Paul write back and say, hello, guys, if it already happened, that means you were left behind. Guys, if it's already happened, that means I and the other apostles, we've been left behind too. Good grief, guys. And consider 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 18. Concerning Philetus and Hymenaeus, who concerning the faith are shipwrecked, teaching that the resurrection is already past. Now listen, if you wanted to quibble, and that's all it would be, about the proper translation of anistemi in the perfect tense in 2 Thessalonians, you can't quibble about the proper translation of 2 Timothy chapter 2:18. Hymenaeus and Philetus were saying the resurrection has already happened. So we have those in Thessalonica and we have those in Ephesus saying the day of the Lord, the resurrection, and the gathering have already taken place. Now, hang on. The resurrection supposedly takes place, and it does, at the return of the Lord in like manner of Acts chapter 1. The day of the Lord and the gathering together unto him, the episynagoge, supposedly takes place at the time of Acts 1, at the time of Matthew 25, 1 to 13, of Matthew 25, 14 and following, at the time of Matthew 25, 31 and following. Okay, are you with me? Are you catching the power of this? So let me ask you a question. If Acts 1 describes a literal, visible descent of Jesus Christ out of heaven as a 5'5" Jewish man at the end of time, when every human that's ever lived and decomposed into the dust, into the seas, etc., how could anybody believe it had already taken place yesterday or last year or whatever? And how could, listen, if I came to you, all right, if I came to you and I said, hey, did you know that the cosmos burned up yesterday? Did you know that the earth burned up yesterday? Did you know that every human being who's ever lived was resurrected out of the grave yesterday? I could tell some really interesting anecdotes on that as I have engaged with people and encountered people who believe in the yet future end of time coming of the Lord when all the dead are out of the dust. But I'm out of time. If it's true that Acts chapter 1 is the day of the Lord of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and if it's true that some believe that the day of the Lord had already taken place, and if it's true that some believe that the resurrection had already taken place, then it must be true they believed that the coming of the Lord of Acts chapter 1 had already taken place. And let me ask you this question, ladies and gentlemen. Given those traditional views of the day of the Lord, the judgment, the resurrection, and Jesus is coming in like manner, how would that be possible? You know, I've written a book on this, and I wrote a paper on this years and years ago, sent it to one of the top scholars in the churches of Christ, and asked him to refute it, asked him to answer it, asked him to help me past this problem. You know what he said? Little brief note, scratched out, a whole lot of to-do about nothing. Pardon me. Seriously? Whole lot of to-do about nothing? When you are taking a position that demands that some believe that the earth had been burned up already, that you teach a doctrine that says the cosmos had already been destroyed, you teach that the day of the Lord is when Christ comes out of heaven as a physical man riding on clouds. That's what you teach, and Paul was saying some believed all of that had already happened. You think it's nothing to worry about. Really? Ladies and gentlemen, how is this possible? We'll see you on the flip side.